The email hit my inbox before sunrise. Subject: Notice of transition meeting, 10 a.m. Those words burned on the screen while the coffee in my mug went cold. After 27 years at Fairview Dynamics, I knew exactly what transition meant. It meant removal, only polished with nicer language. By the time I walked into the office, people were already avoiding eye contact. That told me everything. When you become invisible overnight, it means someone has already decided your ending. I straightened my jacket, forced a smile, and pressed the elevator button anyway. My heart pounded like it wanted to leave before I did. At 10 o'clock sharp, I stepped into the boardroom. The long table shone like a mirror. 10 faces waited, pretending to be kind. At the center sat Victor Hale, our CEO, flanked by Catherine from HR with her neat folder of doom. Lila, Victor began smoothly. After careful thought, the board believes it's time for new energy in leadership. You've been wonderful, but we're offering you an early retirement package. I smiled even as my throat burned. Early retirement, their polite way of saying get out before we push you. I opened the folder. Numbers, clauses, tiny traps hiding in plain sight. One line froze me. Acceptance constitutes voluntary resignation. Voluntary. They wanted me to sign my own firing notice. I looked up. And if I don't accept? Victor's smile didn't move. Then we restructure your department. You'd leave with nothing. We're trying to give you dignity, Lila. That word, dignity, stabbed harder than the threat that I closed the folder slowly. Then I'd like to have my lawyer review it. Catherine blinked. There's no need to complicate this. Oh, it's already complicated, I said. My voice shook, but not from fear. Rage trying to stay polite. When I left the room, I heard someone whisper, "She's taking it badly." They had no idea. That night I poured myself a drink and pulled out an old leather briefcase from my closet, the one I hadn't opened in years. Inside were every contract, every bylaw, every scrap of paper from my first decade at Fairview. I didn't know what I was looking for, only that it had to be there. At midnight, I found it, page 72 of a dusty binder, marked with a yellowing sticky note, Section 12B, Executive Continuity Clause. I remembered fighting for that clause years ago. Back then, we'd wanted to protect long-term executives from being forced out without cause. It said, if any executive with more than 20 years of service is terminated due to restructuring, the company shall pay double severance and full bonus payout unless misconduct is proven. My heart kicked hard. They had just triggered it without realizing. I stared at the clause until my eyes blurred, then whispered, "You forgot who wrote this." The next morning I called Daniel Lee, the best contract lawyer I'd ever met. He showed up with coffee and glasses, sliding down his nose. After reading the page, he grinned. They're amateurs. You could buy a house with what they owe you. Can we enforce it? Oh, we'll do more than enforce it, he said. We'll make them remember it. For the first time in days, I felt steady again. They wanted quiet compliance. Instead, I was about to hand them paperwork they'd choke on. When I returned to the office, my badge still worked, proof they hadn't finished burying me yet. Perfect. I drafted a letter that afternoon, short and sharp. Pursuant to Section 12B of Fairview Dynamics Executive Bylaws, I hereby request immediate enforcement of the Continuity Clause and full payment as defined therein. I attached the evidence, CC'd every board member, HR, and legal, and hit send. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Victor. Let's discuss this privately. Privately. Of course. He wanted to trap me in another room and smile while twisting the knife that I typed back. Happy to meet, with counsel present. When I looked up from my screen, I caught my reflection in the glass wall. I looked tired but calm. The kind of calm that comes when fear burns away and leaves only purpose. They thought they could write my ending. They didn't realize I still had the pen. Victor's office smelled of cedar and control. He gestured for me to sit. Lila, you're making this ugly, he said softly, like he was the disappointed father and I the misbehaving child. I'm making it accurate, I replied. He leaned back. That clause is ancient. It doesn't apply anymore. Then why did your 2018 memo mention it? I slid the copy across his desk. He froze for half a breath. That was internal. Still acknowledgement, I said. And acknowledgement means it's alive. The silence between us felt like glass ready to shatter. Finally, he said, "What do you want?" "I want what you owe me." He smirked. "You won't drag us through court. You care too much about your reputation." I stood, meeting his eyes. "You're right, Victor. That's why I document everything." When I left his office, the air felt lighter. Not easier, just cleaner. They'd spent years teaching me strategy. Now they'd see what happened when I used it. The next morning, I walked into the office like nothing had happened. My badge beeped green. Still alive, but people notice me now, not the way they used to. Conversations stopped when I passed. Emails slowed. The receptionist's smile trembled. Word was spreading. I opened my laptop and saw Victor's reply. "Received. We'll review the clause internally." That was code for, "We're scrambling." By noon, Catherine from HR stopped by. "Victor wants to resolve this quietly," she said, her tone sugary. "Maybe a revised offer?" "Maybe he should read his own bylaws," I said. Her smile twitched. "You're risking a lot, Lila." I leaned back. "So are you." After she left, I closed my door and called Daniel. "They're rattled," I said. "Good," he replied. "Let them sweat." 48 hours, then we filed a claim. That night, I went home and sat in silence. For the first time in years, my apartment felt peaceful. No deadlines. No fake smiles. Just me, my thoughts, and the storm I'd finally learned to control. 2 days later, the storm broke. HR froze my company credit card. My name vanished from 2 internal projects. An assistant whispered that my title had been temporarily reassigned. Retaliation. Textbook and stupid. Daniel met me for lunch downtown. He was grinning before he sat down. "They just made your case stronger," he said. "Document everything." I already have. That evening, I opened a fresh file on my laptop called Fairview Mistakes. Every deleted email, every exclusion, every rumor, they all went in. At 8 p.m., my phone buzzed. A courier stood outside my door with an envelope stamped confidential. Inside was a revised severance agreement. The number was higher, but not close to what Section 12B promised. A note in Victor's handwriting read, "Take this and walk away." I poured a glass of wine and smiled. They still thought this was about money. It wasn't. It was about respect. I took a picture of the offer, filed it under evidence, and texted Daniel one line, "We move." Fairview's lawyers answered our filing within hours. They claimed the clause was obsolete, replaced by newer policies. Daniel wasn't worried. If it was obsolete, they'd have to show proof of removal. We waited. No proof came. Instead, they tried to freeze my company email and revoke my access badge. They forgot I already printed what I needed. 3 days later, a woman from legal called. "Lila, can we settle?" Quietly. I almost laughed. Quiet left the building when you tried to erase me. I hung up and turned on my lamp. On the table sat a pile of old binders, the history of a company built on the backs of people like me, steady, loyal, invisible until inconvenient. By midnight, I found another gem, a 2015 board memo confirming that Section 12B was reaffirmed as active. I highlighted it in yellow and sent it to Daniel. His reply came seconds later. "This seals it." I leaned back in my chair and smiled through tired eyes. Fairview had just signed its own confession. They just didn't know it yet. When the mediation day arrived, I dressed in black. Not mourning, armor. The conference room smelled of coffee and arrogance. Across the table, Victor sat flanked by 3 lawyers. Catherine hovered near the door, eyes down. The mediator began. "Let's keep this civil." Daniel slid the 2015 memo across the table. "You might start with this." The head lawyer read it, frowned, then whispered to Victor. I could almost taste his anger when he looked up. "Where did you get this?" "From the archives," I said. "You know, the ones I built." The mediator cleared his throat. "We'll need to reconvene after reviewing this." As we packed our folders, Victor muttered, "You'll regret this." I turned to him and said quietly, "I already did. That's why I'm fixing it." Outside, Daniel clapped my shoulder.
He's losing ground.
"You felt that, right?" I nodded. He just doesn't know he's already lost. Fairview's next move came fast and dirty. 2 days after mediation, an article appeared online. Sources claim former executive under review for financial misconduct. My name was there. My photo too. I froze, staring at the headline until the words blurred. My stomach twisted, but not from fear, from fury. They wanted to smear me before I won what I called Daniel. They leaked it. "Let them," he said. "We'll trace it." That night, I scrolled through the comments. Some believed it, some didn't.
But all of them were talking about me.
The silence I'd once drowned in was now gone. Around midnight, I opened my laptop and wrote a statement I didn't send. Just a reminder to myself. I will not be erased by the men who built their thrones on my work. I saved it, closed the computer, and stood by the window watching city lights flicker below. They'd taken the first shot. Now it was my turn. The leak didn't scare me. It focused me. For years, I'd let Fairview control the story. Not anymore. Daniel's tech contact traced the leak's IP address to the company network. He smirked when he told me. Guess whose login it came from? Catherine's?
He nodded.
HR fingerprints all over it. Retaliation. This just turned into double damages. I sat back, exhaling slowly. They'd handed me a weapon. By the next morning, Daniel filed an injunction for defamation and retaliation. The court accepted it within hours. Victor called me that afternoon, his voice tight with rage. "You think you can scare us?" I didn't answer right away. "No, Victor. I think I can prove you broke the law." Silence. Then a click. He'd hung up. That night, I poured myself tea instead of wine. I wasn't celebrating. I was steadying. Every scar Fairview gave me was now part of my armor. They tried to bury me under paperwork. I'd learned to read every line of the dirt they shoveled. A week later, mediation resumed. The board's lawyers looked uneasy. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. Daniel laid out a neat folder of evidence, emails, memos, timestamps. The room went still when he reached the final page. Catherine's leaked smear trail. "Your client attempted to destroy Ms. Rowan's reputation," he said. "That's retaliation, and the law doesn't like bullies." The mediator looked at Victor. "Do you deny authorizing this?" Victor's jaw worked, but no sound came. His lawyer jumped in. "We have no comment." Daniel leaned back. "Then we proceed with damages." When the meeting ended, Victor brushed past me. "You're destroying the company you helped build." I looked at him. "No, Victor. I'm saving what's left of its integrity." As I walked out, Catherine avoided my eyes completely. I almost pitied her. Almost. Outside, Daniel grinned. "He's cracking."
"He's been cracked for years," I said.
They just built the company around the hole. Fairview's silence lasted 3 days before the next move, another PR statement, this time defensive. "We are committed to fairness and transparency," it said. Empty words.
So, I decided to speak for myself.
Daniel helped me craft a calm, factual statement for the Herald. After decades of loyal service, I was pressured into early retirement under false terms. I discovered a protective clause that Fairview ignored. When I sought fairness, the response was retaliation. "We send it with documents, dates, memos, emails to BY morning." The article exploded. Executive fights back. Fairview faces retaliation claim. I read the headline 3 times, heartbeat steady. For years, I'd been a name buried inside company reports. Now my voice was louder than their silence. Victor's team tried to spin it, but it was too late. Investors were calling. Employees were whispering. Shareholders demanded answers. For the first time, Fairview wasn't in control of the narrative. I was. And it felt like breathing fresh air after years in a sealed room. 2 nights later, my phone buzzed with a message from Mara, a quiet analyst who'd always believed in me. "You didn't hear this from me," she wrote, "but Victor's panicking. The board's meeting without him tomorrow." I smiled at the screen. About time. The next morning, Fairview's building felt different. The front desk greeted me carefully, as if unsure which side I was on now. Patricia, one of the senior board members, called me into a side office. "Lila," she said gently, "I believe you. We reviewed your evidence. Section 12B is valid." My breath caught. "You're admitting that?" She nodded. "Victor misled us. There will be consequences." When I walked out of that office, people actually looked at me again. Some nodded. Some smiled faintly. It was subtle, but it meant everything. For the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost walking through my own company. I felt seen. And I knew then, this fight wasn't just about me anymore. IT was about every woman they'd ever tried to silence with polite words and quiet doors. That afternoon, an emergency board meeting was called. I wasn't invited, but Patricia sent me a text. "Be nearby." I waited in the hallway outside, watching the frosted glass doors glow with shifting silhouettes. Raised voices leaked through Victor's, sharp and frantic. After an hour, the doors opened. Patricia stepped out, calm and steady. "It's done," she said. "What's done?" "Victor's suspended pending investigation. Catherine's on leave. Legal will contact you about your settlement." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Months of fear and fury suddenly collapsed into quiet relief. Patricia touched my arm. "You fought smart, Lila. Don't lose that." When she left, I stood alone in the hallway, staring at the plaque that read Fairview Dynamics. I'd spent half my life building that name. Now it would forever carry mine beside it, in the fine print of the claws that beat them. The war wasn't over yet, but the ground had shifted. For the first time, Fairview was on defense, and I was holding every card they thought I'd never play. Victor didn't disappear quietly. He never would. Within a week of his suspension, I started receiving emails from anonymous sources accusing me of misusing company funds. The wording was slick, the kind of poison written by someone who knew policy well enough to twist it. Daniel called me right away.
"He's trying to frame you, Lila."
"Don't respond, don't delete. Just forward everything." I did that. He paused. "He's not going to win this. You have truth and timing. Both are on your side." Still, part of me trembled. I'd seen how fast a lie could spread. But this time, I wasn't alone. Patricia emailed me that night. "Ignore the noise. We're preparing the final vote." When I looked at the city lights outside my window, I realized something. Power doesn't leave quietly. It claws and screams on its way out. Victor wasn't fighting to keep the company anymore. He was fighting to keep control, and I was about to take that away for good. The next morning, Daniel called with a hint of excitement. "We found the loophole Victor tried to use against you." "What kind of loophole?" I asked. He chuckled. "He forged an addendum to your old contract, backdated. It's sloppy. The signatures don't even match." My stomach turned, equal parts disgust and relief. He really thought that would hold up?
"He's desperate," Daniel said.
"I'll have the forensic expert confirm it. Once we do, it's fraud." I stared at my reflection in the office window. The same woman they'd underestimated now held evidence that could end a man's career permanently. How long until confirmation? Tomorrow. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the last conversation I'd had with Victor. The smirk, the certainty that I'd backed down. When morning came, Daniel texted one word. Confirmed. Fraud. Victor hadn't just tried to ruin me. He tried to rewrite history. Now, I finally had enough to rewrite his. Fairview's board met again that Friday. This time, I was invited officially. The room felt colder, emptier. Victor's chair sat unoccupied at the head of the table. Patricia motioned for me to sit beside her. "We've reviewed the evidence," she said quietly. "The forged addendum, the retaliation, the clause. The board will vote to terminate Victor's contract and honor yours." I nodded, trying to keep my hands steady. "Thank you." When the meeting began, tension hummed through the air. The legal counsel presented everything: emails, memos, signatures. Each page made the directors' faces tighten further. Finally, Patricia said, "All in favor of enforcing Section 12B and issuing full payment to Ms. Rowan?" Hands rose one by one. Unanimous. A strange calm washed over me, relief laced with something heavier. Vindication, maybe. Patricia leaned closer. You did this the right way, Lila. You used their own rules. As I left the room, I passed Victor in the hallway. He looked smaller, his arrogance gone. Our eyes met for a second. He didn't speak. Neither did I. Sometimes silence is the loudest victory of all. The payment cleared 3 days later that I checked my account twice just to believe it. 7 digits, clean and final. Daniel called to congratulate me. They've also issued an apology letter, though it's about as warm as concrete. I don't need their warmth, I said. Just their acknowledgement. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen surrounded by old files and memories. For months I'd lived in fight mode. Every breath another battle. Now there was quiet, and it felt unfamiliar. I went for a walk that evening. The city hummed with life, cars, laughter, sirens, but inside me, everything was still. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying anyone else's expectations and, deadlines. No politics. No men in suits deciding my worth. They'd force me into early retirement. But they forgot I never stopped being the woman who built half their empire, and now I own my freedom twice over. Patricia called a week later. The board wanted to know if you'd ever consider returning as a consultant. I laughed softly. Tell them I charge triple now. She chuckled. You've earned it. After the call, I pulled out the framed copy of Section 12B from my study and set it on my desk. The paper had yellowed slightly, but the words still glowed with power. That clause had been my safety net all along, buried and forgotten, until they forced me to remember it. Sometimes survival isn't about strength. It's about memory. I stared at my reflection in the glass and whispered, they thought they wrote my ending. Then I smiled. But I wrote the fine print. When I walked out onto my balcony, the sunset painted the sky gold. Somewhere downtown, Fairview's tower gleamed, tall and distant. I didn't hate it anymore that IT had been my battlefield, but now it was just another building in a city that finally belonged to me. 2 weeks later, I drove past Fairview's tower for the first time since everything ended. The building looked smaller now, like someone had drained its arrogance. I pulled over for a minute and just watched the glass windows catch the light. For years, that place had been my world. I'd given it my time, my peace, my heart. I'd believed loyalty was a shield. But the truth was simpler. Loyalty only protects you when it's mutual. I took one last look and whispered, thank you. Not for what they'd done, but for what they'd taught me. When I got home, I started sorting through old boxes, photos from company trips, plaques, conference badges. I kept one. My first nameplate, Lila Rowan, Director of Operations. It wasn't a reminder of what I'd lost. It was proof of what I'd built. The rest went into a donation bin. Some endings don't need trophies. They just need peace. And for the first time in years, peace was exactly what I had. At first, the quiet felt strange. I'd spent decades measuring my worth in meetings and results. Without them, mornings felt too still. But stillness can be healing. I started small, coffee on the balcony, long walks through the park, journaling before bed. Each day, the noise in my head faded a little more. One afternoon, Daniel came by for lunch. He smiled at my calm. You look lighter, he said. I admitted. For once, I don't have to prove anything. We talked about starting something new, a consulting firm, maybe at a place that protected people from the kind of corporate traps I'd escaped. The idea grew quickly in my mind, bright and warm. What if we build a space where fairness isn't fine print? I said. Daniel grinned. I'll draft the paperwork. When he left, I opened my notebook and wrote one line in bold ink. Harbolite Consulting, where people come before power. It wasn't revenge. It was legacy. Within 3 months, Harbolite Consulting came to life in a small downtown office. No glass walls, no polished silence, just light, laughter, and shared purpose. Mara joined first, leaving Fairview quietly. Then 2 others followed, women who'd seen too much of the same system and wanted something better. We worked long hours, but they felt different, cleaner somehow. Every client meeting reminded me why I'd started. One day, Mara knocked on my door, smiling. Guess who just signed with us? I looked up. Who? An old Fairview partner. They'd rather deal with us now. I laughed. It wasn't about beating Fairview anymore, but it still felt poetic. That night, as I locked up, I looked around our tiny office. Plants by the window, sticky notes on every wall, voices echoing with joy. This was mine. Not inherited, not borrowed. Built. And I realized something I'd never said out loud. Fairview had taken my job, but in doing so, they gave me back myself. Months passed, and I stopped checking headlines. But one morning, Mara slid her phone across my desk. The article read, Fairview shares plunge after internal audit reveals years of mismanagement. I read it twice, then pushed the phone back. It was bound to happen, I said quietly. Mara hesitated. Doesn't it feel good to see? I smiled faintly. It feels fair. That afternoon, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a short note, written in careful handwriting. You were right. Some lessons are learned the hard way. No signature, but I knew it was Victor. I folded the paper once and slid it into a drawer beside the framed Section 12B clause. Not forgiveness. Not bitterness. Just closure. Sometimes winning isn't about watching others fall. It's about finally standing tall again, and I had never stood taller. A year later, we held Harbolite's first anniversary dinner on a rooftop overlooking the river. The air was warm, the city lights flickered like gold, and laughter floated around the table. Mara raised her glass. To Lila Rowan, the woman who proved the fine print can be power. Everyone cheered. I looked at them, these bright, determined faces, and felt something settle deep inside me.
Peace. Pride. Purpose.
When the noise faded, I stepped aside to the railing, watching the skyline that once belonged to Fairview. It still gleamed, but it no longer intimidated me. They forced me into early retirement, I whispered to the wind. But they paid for my freedom twice. I smiled, a real one this time. People think power means having control. But real power is knowing when to walk away, and when to walk back stronger. Behind me, my team called my name, laughter echoing through the night. I turned, heart light, and for the first time in a long, long while, I was exactly where I belonged.